Hello YouTube, Sidekick here in what may for some of you appear to be a slightly unexpected place. Yes, in fact, I am in an F-5E. So for longtime viewers and denizens of my Discord channel, you will be surprised to see me here since I have more or less sworn a blood oath not to fly this aircraft in DCS. To be fair, that really has much less to do with the aircraft in DCS or the aircraft at all, and more to do with its history, particularly its history as a Canadian aircraft. But I have decided lately that I should probably get over that, partly because of the harassment, encouragement from members of my Discord channel who have pointed out to me that it actually is a very nice aircraft in DCS, and there's a lot of really interesting things you can do with it. And that is true, and I have figured that out with relatively little time in the aircraft. It is a very nice aircraft. It's an excellent jet that is uncomplicated, and if you want to learn jet-style flying without a lot of complications and without a lot of worries about sensors and things, it really is a great place to start. The other reason, honestly, that I wanted to hop in the F-5 was I realized that the bombing system in the F-5 is actually quite similar to the bombing system in the F-4C. Not sure what it's going to look like in the F-4E, but in the F-4C it uses a very simple bombing system, and it's very essentially similar to what we see in the F-5, which is not surprising since they are jets that are of reasonably the same age. So I wanted to actually use the F-5E because it's a bit easier to fly than the F-4, and it would also give me a chance to experiment with this bombing system, and I'll talk a little bit about that after we get taken off here. So as I was saying, the bombing sight system in the F-5E, like the F-4, is what as basic as it gets. You basically have a sight reticle, you don't have a CCIP pipper, and you don't, unlike the A4, you don't have a means of actually designating the target. So you really just have the sight to go on. Now you can depress the sight, which I'm going to do, and I'm going to set it to -50 for this practice. But the issue I have is that when I depress the sight, I now no longer on the HUD have any indication of the flight path vector of the aircraft. And the problem that I have with that is that not having a flight path vector does complicate the bombing process, at least for me. Now, I will point out that I'm going to talk about the process that I use, and that I've been talking about now for a couple of years in my Iron Bomber's Guide to the DCS Galaxy. There are some excellent videos out there about how to bomb in the F-5, including ones by Sully. And I certainly, I'll put those links to those, so you're absolutely welcome to check that out. Sully is a seasoned instructor in these sorts of things, so to some extent he knows a lot more about this than I do. But I know what works for me in DCS, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. The thing that I mind about not having the flight path vector is that it complicates the problem of trying to make your dive consistent. What you really want to do is aim the flight path vector at kind of a known aim-off mark, and then you want to dive at that, and then you want to wait for the pipper in its depressed state to come up to the target. That's what really works for me. And so when I first started flying the F-5, I had some trouble arriving at the delivery point, the release point, at the right parameters. The parameters are well documented, well understood, but I was having a hard time hitting those, and my accuracy was suffering. And then I noticed something about the sight. At 50 mils depression, you saw me just flipping it back up and down there. At 50 mils depression, the top of the sight is about where the middle of the sight is at 0. In other words, I think that this is a 50 mil radius circle. I haven't seen anywhere in the documentation that says that, but that's what it seems like to me. So that means that I can use the top of the sight, the top hash mark on the sight, as effectively like a flight path vector. So I can attempt to put that on an aim-off mark, dive toward that point, and then wait until the pipper is over the target. And if I've got the sight dialed in right, then hopefully that will give us some reasonably accurate results and also make it reasonably reproducible without having to try and juggle dive angle and speed and altitude all at the same time, which of course is always the challenge that you have when you're trying to do this. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't do all of the things, for instance, that Sully preaches, which is that you do have to have a good, consistent base. You have to have a good, consistent pattern. You have to be doing this the same way every time. But I find this last little piece really helps improve my accuracy. So let's take a look. We're going to roll in on the standard first main target on the range here in a sec. Right about there. Roll in, lift vector up to the target. We're going to pull the sight reticle up to the target. Now we're going to treat the top of the sight reticle like it's our flight path vector. And I'm going to roll that on, and I'm going to pick an aim off mark. It just happens to be right on the back of the target circle. Just happens to be about 50 meters, and then I'm just going to wait for the pipper to come up to the target right about there. And now we're bombs away. Alright, let's pull off and see what the target impact tracking script has to say. Okay, well, that looks pretty reasonable, I have to say. Basically target round, 30-degree dive, a little bit more than 30, 480 knots, and around 2,400 feet. So those seem to be the parameters that we need with this sight setting. So let's go around and just see how much of that was just dumb luck, shall we? Now again though, I want to point out that this method of doing it with the aim off mark, to some extent it's a little bit self-correcting. I mean, obviously if we hit exactly those same parameters again, we're going to get exactly the same result, but that is difficult to do. At least it's difficult to do for me. Probably less difficult for professional pilots who are just used to flying the aircraft consistently. So I use this aim-off method because it's a little bit self-correcting. It turns out that if your dive angle's a little low, then you'll drop a little lower. If your dive angle's a little high, you'll drop a little higher. It's just the way the aim-off system works. It kind of corrects itself a little bit. The one thing that it doesn't really take into account of is speed, and I found that that's pretty important in the F5. So we're going to try and keep our speed reasonably consistent, and then we're going to hope that using this method is going to kind of make the trade-off between dive angle and altitude within a certain range, at least make that a little bit easier, but it won't help us if we overspeed. Alright, so let's line up and try this again. Once again, we're going to use the top of the sight as our flight path vector. We've got to get it up to the target, get rolled out smoothly. Sun's a little bit of a problem in this orientation. Okay, now, I got to get it back on for line. Wait until it's over the... Alright, we were off to the right. So we'll see what that has to say. Once again, doesn't look like a bad result, but we'll have to take a look and see what the target impact tracking script has to say. Okay, and there are the results. So a little bit less accurate, between 25 and 30 meters off. About the same dive angle, about the same altitude, but we were a little faster and we were also a little long, so that correlates. Now, to put it in perspective, though, at 2 o'clock off the target, if you do the trigonometry, you'll realize that about half of that error is in distance, say. So somewhere around 15 meters long for about 20, almost 30 knots extra speed. But still a pretty good run. So let's give it at least one more shot here, and again see how accurate we can get with this method. So I will point out that I am essentially trying to fly more of the Air Force pattern than the Navy pattern for the range today, flying a square pattern, trying to roll in so 90 degrees to the target and about 10,000 feet, and using the aim off mark on the horizon there, the two rivers there, to try and give myself the right distance from the target as I fly in. All of those things are important. Just not talking about them a lot in this video because we're just trying to master this sight. So again, we're going to roll in. We're going to use the top of the sight. I think I'm a little bit close. We're going to roll in. We're going to use the top of the sight of the flight path vector. It goes on the back of the circle. We wait for the pipper to come up to the middle of the circle, and here we go, rolling in. Okay, once again, get the sight up to it. Oops, get back on for line. Roll out properly, get it up to the aim-off mark. Get it up to the aim-off mark, and there. I'm not all that happy with that run that time. It took me a little while to actually establish the aim-off mark. And, not surprisingly, I think we also went long, because I think I was aiming long. So let's take a look and see what the target impact tracking script has to say. Okay, overall not great. We were high, fast, and long, and we were almost 50 meters from the target, albeit only about 25 meters of that was probably actually in distance, but at any rate, not a great drop. And, you know, most of that came from really not a very good roll-in. Wasn't on the target properly. Was scrambling to get online. Wasn't getting the range right. So let's try that one more time, see if we can get a better roll-in, see if we can pay a little bit more attention to what we're doing here, and see if we can have a better drop. So we'll go around one more time. Again, we're trying to fly a square pattern, so coming east across the face of the target, using those rivers on the horizon as my long distance landmark to try and get myself lined up at the right distance. As I said, it was a little close on the last one. We dove a little bit more steeply than I would have wanted to. So we'll try and back ourselves out a little bit farther away this time, and also try to control that roll in better, try to bring the top of that aiming reticle almost on line with the target as we're rolling out, so we don't have to fiddle around quite as much. We can focus on dropping at the right point. So maybe a little bit less of a dramatic roll in this time, a little bit less dramatic pull up, try and be a little bit more accurate. And it still slid out to the left. Have to learn to account for that. Get online, get the aim off mark, and that was better. Alright, feeling better about that drop. Looking back, it looks quite a bit better. So let's see what the target impact tracking script has to say about that. Okay, looks like we were a little high, a little fast, a little steep, and we dropped a little bit short, although again, we were off to the right. Going to have to correct my leftist tendencies in my roll in there. But range, you know, we're off by about somewhere between 15 and 20 meters, which is pretty decent. So I think given the rudimentariness of the sighting system, these are actually pretty good results. So I'm thinking that I'm going to keep refining this method of doing the aim-off mark and diving, and I'm going to try to apply it to the F4. If you have a better way of bombing in the F-5E, please, by all means, contribute some constructive comments in the commentary or come to the Discord and let's talk about it. For now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.